When I started college in the late 1990s, a book that got referenced a lot in political history lectures was called The End of History. The idea was, after the bloody wars of the 20th century, Western liberal democracy was triumphant. Fascism and communism were historical relics. Over. Seems quaint, 25 years later, with war in Europe, devastation in Gaza, and fragile and mistrustful talks between Israel and Palestine. And in the U.S., political assassinations and National Guard troops on American streets. Photojournalist Peter van Agtmael has chronicled all of this, both in war zones and in American communities, and followed what happened after. He was drawn early to stories of war by his grandfather, a World War II veteran, who taught him about America's power to make the world better by using force for good. When Peter started taking photographs at war, he saw its horrors up close and believed that taking the right picture would help end conflicts. But after working in war zones over 2 decades, he started to have his doubts. His 2024 book of photography is called Look at the USA, a diary of war and home. It includes photos of American missions in Iraq and Afghanistan and how those assignments overseas changed the sorts of stories that Peter wanted to tell. He wanted to follow how disenfranchisement and desperation can lead to violence and radicalization, including in the U.S. He took pictures of police brutality, protest. He was at the Capitol on January 6th, and his work has asked viewers to engage with other darkly American subjects. In 2015, he took photos of active KKK members and documented their rituals, like a cross burning and a wedding. One of those KKK photos was picked up by Ye, the rapper formerly known as Kanye West, as cover art for an upcoming album. Peter says without permission. We'll get to that story. How we use photos and what they say is increasingly an issue relative to all of us with a phone. The photos and videos we take and post can all be subject to someone else's agenda. We are not in control of how they will be used or even what they come to mean. And for Peter, that's brought a humility about the impact of his photos and bearing witness.
And we all know that now that kind of iconic images, they're not necessarily the things that provoke change. They are the symbols of change that appear at the moment when change is ready for them. And those conditions just simply weren't going to be in place in these wars. I realize that now. I didn't realize that as an ambitious, arrogant 24-year-old.
This is Death, Sex, and Money. The show from Slate about the things we think about a lot and need to talk about more. I'm Anna Sale. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
I first connected with Peter van Agtmael in early summer. He was in Paris, where he now lives with his wife, who's also a journalist, and she was pregnant, very pregnant.
We're waiting any minute now. It's 39 weeks, so.
Oh, you're right there.
I mean, it's funny because the French version the Americans have like a 40-week, and the French say it's 41 weeks. I don't know what accounts for the distinction. I don't think
French people are just like, chill.
there's no biological difference as far as I'm aware between French babies and American babies, but, maybe Americans just want to be first.
Do you have a plan for how you're going to, whether you're going to take your camera into the delivery room or those first minutes and hours?
I am planning to take my camera into the delivery room after careful negotiation with my wife. As long as the camera doesn't get in the way of my duties as a partner, which it probably will to some degree, and then I'll have to adjust. But I would like it not to, I don't want to see the birth of my child through like a viewfinder. I don't want that filter between my lived reality and like the reality that's actually happening. Like sometimes the camera mediates these things a little bit.
Is it why not go in without the camera?
I never honestly seriously considered the prospect. I think because I feel confidently that like the camera won't get in the way of the experience. Maybe on some level because I wouldn't be surprised if there are times that I want to. What's interesting about the camera in chaotic situations is that, like, when you have something to focus on other than the situation itself, it sometimes helps me like deal emotionally better with the situation, make clearer choices, make better choices because there's a structure to it. And I suppose there's a comfort in that in a way because I'm so used to navigating intensity with a camera in hand. I think there's a part of me that, I don't know, maybe wouldn't be sure about how to navigate it without it. I think more than anything else, I want, probably the single most significant moment of my life to have like a record beyond like the imprint of memory on my brain.
Yeah. Can we go back to when you were a kid and thinking about what you might do? Were you attracted first to photography or attracted first to the idea of being in a war zone?
I was definitely first attracted to the idea of being in a war zone. Like my earliest memories are this kind of mixture of like war stories from my grandfather, stories about World War II from my grandfather. But these were stories about like camaraderie and personal growth and adventure. They were bloodless stories. They were stories that had happy endings.
Did he serve?
He did, yeah. And he served in Europe, and it was kind of the single most formative event of his life. And he liked to talk about it. And I liked to listen to it because he was a very charismatic guy. I worshipped him, and these were these stories that seemed to shape the identity of the man that I looked up to, besides my father, the kind of man I looked up to the most. And though paradoxically, my father also was in the military as a conscript, as a draftee, and did not enjoy his military experience. Saw a friend of his killed mistakenly on the practice range during training. Never liked guns, never liked the application of violence, and also talked about those things to me as kind of a counterpoint to my grandfather, because I think he could see how much I was sort of enamored with my grandpa's stories. But my grandpa's stories, for whatever reason, they held more weight and strength in a way.
In his book, Look at the USA, A Diary of War and Home, Peter writes that war looked like, quote, a sure path to manhood and respectability, which was something he, as a self-described weirdo outcast, desperately craved. When Peter started at Yale in 1999, he briefly considered joining the Army himself and even attended a few recruitment information sessions nearby because ROTC officers were not allowed on Yale's campus. But then he took a photography course.
It was this very like surreal thing because I took this class not having a particularly strong notion that, not having even the vaguest fantasy that this might be like my path in life, and something kind of like clicked into place so intensely, almost like mystically, that like very quickly, within kind of really like weeks as I remember it, but we all know how memory is
Yeah.
its own story. But certainly like very early on within the course of that semester, I understood, oh yeah, I'm going to be a photographer, and like, declared it to myself and declared it to my family and friends, and everyone's like, all right, is that a job?
And this is pre-September 11th or after September 11th?
This is pre-September 11th. This is about a year before. And when September 11th happened, it kind of crystallized this notion. To me, it was like, all right, this is this transformative historical event that's directly impacting my country, my generation. I want to be a journalist. I want to be a photographer. I'm interested in war. Like, it was kind of like, in a weird, demented way, like this like absolutely horrific event in some ways like kind of clarified the direction of my life. And kind of from that moment on, I was trying to make decisions that would lead me directly to covering those wars, the wars that followed in the name of our country's honor.
What year did you graduate college?
2003.
So that's the same year I graduated college. And I remember that spring. I don't know what it was like on your campus, but it was the lead up to the war in Iraq. And so there were protests. And then I can remember when the invasion happened while I was on campus. And so we graduated into that world.
Yeah.
It wasn't just 9/11. The war in Iraq had just started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How does one with a Yale degree figure out how to go from holding your camera and thinking about wanting to be in a war zone to being in a war zone with a camera, having a job? How did you find that?
There was like about a 2.5-year process between graduating and going to Iraq for the first time. Essentially, I would have been like woefully unprepared, both in terms of my ability to kind of master my own craft and express what I was seeing with complexity and emotion through the tool of the camera. Like, I could not have done that upon graduation because I just wasn't a very good photographer. So I applied for some traveling fellowships basically, and I got a fellowship to go to China for a year. And so I spent a year along the Yangtze River, basically developing my first kind of very long form documentary photography project. And that experience taught me a lot about solitude, about making something out of nothing with the lens, about kind of interacting thoughtfully and carefully and with other cultures and in other languages. It was a really kind of like formative experience. And when I got back from that year, I started as a freelance photographer. And I was just sort of at home, going down to the White House for a few months in Capitol Hill, trying to take political pictures that weren't very good. And then the tsunami happened on Boxing Day. I flew to Thailand, and like many journalists that do this kind of work, someone else's like horrific tragedy was the thing that set my career into motion.
Your opportunity.
And by the end of it, had some pretty good assignments, and I made enough money to kind of make choices, and started getting a lot of assignment experience. Like when Dave Chappelle like left his TV show, Time Magazine called me to take a portrait. Like, they had an exclusive session with him on this beach in Durban. And all the other photographers were unavailable because it was really last minute. So they sent me, and I did a good job. And so that created other opportunities. And so pretty soon I was kind of flying all over sub-Saharan Africa. And I kind of made a big leap, both in my photography and my understanding of how to like apply it. And by the end of it, by the end of that year, I felt like I'd run out of kind of excuses. That going to Iraq had been in the back of my mind for years. And I had the feeling that I was ready. And so I acted upon it by essentially just emailing the public affairs officer for the U.S. military in Baghdad and saying that I wanted to go spend 2 months with an infantry unit. And they were like, okay, here's your permission letter. Just show up in Kuwait in like 2 weeks. And that's what I did.
Peter arrived in Mosul in 2006. To embed with the U.S. military means living with soldiers and also living apart from them.
It was pretty surreal. I mean, this is the paradox of the experience was I'm living with U.S. soldiers, young guys my age, we're going out every day on these patrols on an interpersonal level. Like, I really like the guys I'm with, I wouldn't say forming friendships necessarily, but there's certain like bonds of camaraderie that occur in these situations, whether or not you're
Wait,
a
what's
part of
the
them.
distinction? Why not friendships?
Because I was not a very seasoned journalist at that point, I thought that like the best way I could do my job right was to try and ascribe to what I thought were like the core expectations of being a journalist, which is like maintaining your neutrality via a certain kind of distance from your subject. So you can maintain like a lack of sentimentality and like your powers of perception and observation. And so that was kind of that's what I had in mind. But, you spend 2 months with the same people and like, those notions, like those boundaries start to fade just by default, by sheer loneliness and fear, And I mean, it's, that first trip particularly was like this formative experience on many levels and informed like what was to come. But what was striking about it was like this vast machinery of the U.S. military that had been kind of like mobilized, and there was all this training and this like incredible like equipment, and everyone knew their jobs and everything was like clean and efficient. But then you'd like go out on these patrols and quickly like didn't feel like there was a particular like sense or purpose to just wandering around waiting to get attacked. And then over time, like increasingly this cognitive dissonance kind of started forming that all these like strategies that were implemented to so-called like beat the insurgency and win the war had like no real bearing on reality. And like this disconnect started growing bigger and bigger, and the war started getting frankly worse and worse. Partway through my time there, the mosque in Samara was bombed and the civil war began in earnest, and bodies are appearing in the streets, tied with piano wire, half-eaten by dogs. It was a bad time that was getting worse and worse, and there was this deep disconnect between like what felt like strategy and what felt like reality.
Peter would ultimately go to Iraq and Afghanistan more than 10 times, and he took thousands of photos. His book has just a few of them from those early days in Iraq. In one, a soldier holds up a bloody shoe after a suicide bombing. A child looks into the camera as he bleeds from the head during a raid on his home. The face of a U.S. soldier, tinged black and eyes swollen after surviving an IED explosion. Peter said he witnessed dozens of combat deaths.
I look at these pictures still, like I still feel the power of those moments and those memories. But the pictures, like what's strange about being a photographer is that over time, when you first take a picture, the picture is almost immaterial. It's your memory that is powerful, and the picture is just a symbol of that memory. But then as time goes on, the memories begin to fade and change, and the memories get shaped around the picture. And then at some point, the memory in a weird way, like, is the picture.
Yeah. What were you taking pictures for? Like, what was it for? Who was it for?
Well, I had the notion that, like, it was going to get published because I'd spent the previous year like on assignment nonstop for Time magazine and thought of myself as like a, hotshot young photographer that was going to tell the truth about the war to the American public, like and follow in the footsteps and traditions of these photographers I'd admired from the Vietnam War, who I'd understood through like the power of their commitment and their courage, helped end an unjust war, which is a story like most stories that's partly true and partly false. And so I saw myself as kind of continuing in that tradition, but hadn't yet kind of like understood that this wasn't the Vietnam War. And it wasn't, we weren't going to mobilize society. I wasn't going to mobilize society with my pictures because It was an all-volunteer army from the margins of the power structure. It wasn't a draft that was affecting every young man in America potentially. The conditions weren't there to mobilize the society, to affect the society. I realize that now. I didn't realize that at the time. So that was the thought. That was the premise in my mind. That was the way I excused my behavior in a certain way too, because I was going there against, the wishes of my parents. And many times during my wife's pregnancy right now, I start to think of anytime there's a weird symptom and you fear for this kid that you don't even know, I think, God,
Yeah.
what did I do to my poor parents over the years,
What were you, when you would cycle off being in a war zone in your 20s and into your 30s, like what would
Into my
what would you
40s
do
even.
into your 40s? Well, like particularly as a young man, before you really knew that there was things that would happen when you were coming down from that experience. Like what were you like? What would you do when you would come home? How would you spend your time? And were you pleasant to be around?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'd probably have to get some other people on the line in order to answer that question with precision. I didn't really know how to handle what I was doing, what I was seeing. I had gone from like a pretty normal life to one that was really like deeply mired in the chaos of war. And it was like it's a very solo thing to do. Like I'd fly there alone and I'd fly back alone. And I didn't know a lot of other photographers and journalists because there just weren't many there at the time. And I hadn't gotten to journalism school. I didn't have a community. So I just like come home to a country that like was just going about its business. And yet my life was like profoundly changing. And the more I kind of tried to connect with friends and family, the more I struggled to, because they weren't interested in the same things I was. I couldn't make them interested and passionate about the same things I was. And instead of like being sad about my experiences, I think it just made me angry. And a little bitter. And I dealt with that in the kind of classic ways of, drinking too much and smoking too much weed and kind of self-isolating at times. And when it would become too much, I'd go back to war because that was the thing that was giving me like purpose and clarity and meaning. And that kind of worked in a weird way for a while because also assignments started coming in and then bigger assignments started coming in. And then I joined Magnum Photos, which is this kind of very prestigious photo agency. And so I was getting like and winning awards and I was getting all this like validation that I was doing the right thing. And culturally within the profession, there isn't a lot of talk of like weakness and sadness and fear and anger. And so I didn't know what to do with my emotions other than like bury them or use substances to try and manage them in weird ways, and then the wheels started coming off basically,
Coming up, what happened when the wheels came off, and why Peter started taking more photos at home than abroad, including one that he said was edited and used without permission for an album cover for Ye, Kanye West.
Just the strangeness of it, the creepiness of it, the surreality of it, I still don't know what to make of it because it's not over. So I'm still in the what the fuck phase a little bit.
If you are still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. At Slate, our president, Charlie Kammer, is using Mint Mobile, and he says that more people should be trying this out. He found it really easy to switch providers. The SIM card was shipped to his home. They let him use his existing phone, and he didn't even have to change his phone number. He tried out the $15 a month deal and got unlimited talk and text over their 5G network at literally a fraction of what he was paying with someone else. And you, too, can ditch overpriced wireless and their jaw-dropping monthly bills, unexpected overages, and hidden fees. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/DSM. That's mintmobile.com/DSM. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 per month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Cooler days call for layers that last, and Quince is a go-to for quality essentials that feel cozy, look refined, and won't blow your budget. Refined and cool is how I feel in my white linen button-down shirt from Quince. I can wear it and it can look airy and low-key for hanging out in a park, and you can also dress it up and make it even a little rock and roll, like I did when I wore it to a music show the other night with a blingy costume jewelry necklace and a hint of a black bra showing through. Quince has all sorts of pieces that'll turn into your fall uniform. Their wool coats, for example, look designer level and cost a fraction of the price because Quince partners directly with top-tier ethical factories and cuts out the middlemen. They deliver luxury quality pieces at half the price of similar brands. It's the kind of wardrobe upgrade that feels smart, stylish, and effortless. Find your fall staples at Quince. Go to quince.com/DSM for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/DSM to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/DSM. Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what romance you're into, you can't be pinned down. Unless you want to be. You can find a book boyfriend in the city or another on the hockey field, or if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Whether you are new to audiobooks or a longtime listener, the Audible app makes it easy to get lost in a romance. Like for me, I have this track record of forgetting to bring my book with me and then being bummed when I find myself mindlessly scrolling instead of reading. The Audible app saves me from this because it's right there on my phone, so I can dig right back into my book. And here's a recommendation if you need one. It's called The Ministry of Time by Callie Ann Bradley. I'm about halfway through. This is like a science fiction-y romance with characters that are intricately rendered and real feeling, and it's sexy with a will they, won't they plotline that keeps me pulled in. It's about time travel, and the protagonist is a time travel caseworker of sorts who is helping a 19th century explorer get his head around contemporary London. If you're new to romance, this is a good entry point. It was a best book of the year from NPR, Vanity Fair, Vox, and former President Barack Obama. On Audible, you can listen to modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest Romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, and Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. Plus, Audible has all the really steamy stuff, too. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/DSM. That's audible.com/DSM. This is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate. I'm Anna Sale. In 2011, Peter van Agtmael was turning 30 and going through a bad breakup when he heard that two friends, photojournalists Tim Hetherington and Chris Hondros, had been killed while reporting in Libya.
Tim and Chris were super experienced, super skilled photographers, with almost 20 years of experience each behind them. I mean, they were no fools. And so it's like, I think there's this notion that like the more experience you build, the more likely you are to make the right decisions. But, it's war, and surviving or dying is like, sheer luck most of the time.
Peter was still going to war zones himself. When he went to take pictures in Egypt during the Arab Spring protest, he was attacked by a mob.
I was first being beaten and then was knocked unconscious, and then had this extremely weird thing happen where like actively in my like unconscious state was like floating above my prone form in some sort of celestial form, pointing angrily at my physical body and saying, so this is how you die, like asking rhetorically, like, you idiot, you for getting yourself in this position. And then I kind of regained.
That's pretty harsh. Yourself as an angel is just like criticizing you. It's not self-compassion. It's you dummy.
Exactly. Yeah. Huh. And, but then these people came and saved my life.
Fellow journalists or
no, Egyptians, part of the same group of people that were like beating me, like came in and carried me out into the middle of these people like beating me, I guess, and carried me out, and I regained consciousness as they were like carrying me on their shoulders.
Whoa.
And the group that was beating me kept beating me. They were like following the group and like continuing to attack me. Yeah, it was a crazy experience.
Did that change the way you evaluated risk and what you wanted to do? Where you wanted to be to take photographs?
I mean, it did. It did to some degree. I mean, the problem was that I felt like I had so much left unresolved. I felt like this work that I'd begun, that looking at the shadows of 9/11 as manifested first through these wars, and then their kind of like impact on how the war came home, and then their impact on society, that this was going to be a story with a very, very long tail. And it felt like why I existed. So while it did change to some degree, like I wasn't going to war pathologically anymore. Like one of the big things that I questioned after that was like, what was I doing covering the Egyptian revolution anyhow? Like, I don't know what's going on here. And I've never been to, I don't know anything about Egypt. I don't know anything about this revolution. And like, I'm only really effective as a communicator photographically when I'm like deeply invested in the story I'm telling. I was there because it was there. And escaping demons and chasing adventure and adrenaline. These are very, very bad reasons and very foolish reasons to be making those choices for me personally. So it did crystallize like my approach where like I was like, all right, I'm only gonna, work on the conflicts that are intimately connected to what I care to communicate.
Can I ask you about that? As you thought about how to capture, as you say, the long tail of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the U.S., when you're a war photographer, you take a plane to where the action is and you show up and you take photographs of the action and the time between the action. Like when you started to think about how might I take pictures of Americans back in the U.S., how did you start? Like how did you think about where you needed to go?
It happened pretty organically in a way. As I started to drop kind of some of what I consider these like journalistic barriers of like having intimacy with the people I was photographing, I began to become friends with some soldiers. And I started, in certain cases, just visiting them when we were both home, because I wasn't finding that connection with my friends from college and high school and with my family. And like, neither were they. They were going through their own version of what I was going through. And so there was a certain kind of sanctuary in like being present with the other people you'd experienced the wars with. And that began to take me also like out of like this bubble of kind of politics and privilege that I'd more or less kind of existed in for the rest of my life before spending time in Iraq. And a lot of the people I was meeting, in war zones, where the soldiers that I was meeting in Iraq and Afghanistan were those that had kind of been left behind. And so I was like, instead of just these being like towns you might stop in to fuel up your gas tank on your way to somewhere else, like I was staying in people's homes and spending days, weeks sometimes with them, and not like taking pictures, but I didn't have an assignment. I didn't know where the pictures were going to go. And neither did they. It was just what I did. I took pictures. They were photographed. We drank some beer. We drove around. We smoked some weed, whatever. We hung out. And it started opening up all these questions, for me about the country itself, not just, as in the shadow of these wars.
One of the people Peter spent time with was a veteran named Raymond who had fought in Iraq. They met during Raymond's recovery at Walter Reed Hospital. Peter wrote in his book, Raymond was smart, charming, and cocky. I wanted to photograph him, and he wanted to be photographed. I was coy but clumsy about my interest, until eventually he admonished me to just start taking pictures.
He'd gotten his leg blown off and was in a coma for a month, while serving in a war that he had largely kind of lost belief in. And so to be kind of like a symbol of like the violence of that war lent him a kind of importance that he valued a lot, and so like these kind of so there was kind of like this broad agreement in a way about what we were doing and how we were collaborating. And we had a good time together, but we had for a while, there was a real intimacy, partly because we got along extremely well, partly because I wanted to photograph him and he wanted to be photographed. But that as time went on, I wanted to photograph, I was more interested in photographing other things. I was also more interested in kind of getting out of this sort of psychological hole that I was in. And so I didn't want to photograph him the way I'd been photographing him, with that kind of intensity, because part of our experience together was also going into, a bit of a sort of psychological and substance hole to some degree.
Yeah.
And so, and I needed to get myself out of that. And he was struggling to get himself out of that. And so, I kind of broke away, basically.
I think what you're describing is, in some ways, you're finding that people who served in the conflicts that you covered, there were things that they understood and you understood that nobody else in your lives understood. And still there was this difference for you that this is work, like you can focus on other assignments. Like I think it's clear from the photograph in the book of Raymond, he's sitting on a couch, he's smoking a cigarette, he has a dog sleeping next to him, and then a friend is napping. Like, it's so intimate. And also what the limits of that intimacy, as a journalist, and also the ethics that can get complicated probably when you care about them, when they care about you, when they care about how they're represented. Yeah. You want to show something true. It seems very tough to keep a simple friendship going.
Oh yeah, I mean, exactly. And that's all the reasons why these kind of like journalistic standards and barriers and expectations are expectations too, because like once the waters get really, really muddy between what is work and what is friendship and what is like what where there was no real line between my life and my work at that point. I was reading too much Hunter S. Thompson, I think, and I think the journalists I admired were the ones that threw off all restraint. And that worked for a while, and until it didn't. And it's, as you said, like I had a way. I always could leave. I could always leave the war. I can always leave the story. There was always a door. And really after that, I never I ended up journalistically having to find much more of this kind of hybrid model between pure kind of neutral objectivity and like full gonzo immersion, because like it wasn't going to work. So it wasn't going to work for my own, for my soul, I suppose, more than anything.
This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Here's what happens when you go to Saks.com and browse around a little bit. You very quickly get a sense of what is happening in fashion. It's basically like walking the streets of the most fashionable block in New York City without leaving my house. For instance, maybe you have been wondering what is happening with jeans right now and what is my jeans personality. Well, you can go to Saks.com, just go to the clothing vertical, scroll down to where it says jeans, click on that, and then there it is, all of these different jean silhouettes. The barrel silhouette, wide leg, high-rise, straight leg jean, something called the half-pipe ankle jean from Mother. There's Rag & Bone, Good American, Cynthia Rowley, Frame, designers and brands I know, and ones that I'm glad I'm discovering. There is so much to explore at Saks.com based on your personal style and what you are looking for. So this fall, whether you're going to try out the latest fashion trends or looking to curate a closet that stands the test of time, Saks has you covered. And listen to this. They have in-store stylists there to guide and inspire you, helping you find pieces that fit every aspect of your lifestyle. Or if you prefer online shopping, Saks.com offers a curated selection tailored to your taste, from new arrivals by your favorite designers to stylish pieces for your everyday needs. If you want shopping to be fun and easy, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day. Okay, I have some bad news for you. No matter what day it is right now, as you're listening to me, Monday is not far away. And every Monday for me, or sometimes it's Sunday evening, I realize, shoot, I should have planned out what we're going to eat this week. That is, unless I use Hungryroot to help me fill a weekly cart filled with personalized picks shipped right to my door. Hungryroot takes work off of your plate and makes it easy to fill your fridge. You can pick how many dinners you'd like to have. You can tell them what kind of meats or not meats you like to eat in your family. Hungryroot's choices for you get smarter as it gets to know you, and you can edit that cart, pick out not just meals, but snacks, breakfast items, even supplements. It takes the stress out of grocery shopping by filling your cart with custom selections that, again, get smarter with every order. You just take a quick quiz, and their smart cart technology recommends groceries and supplements tailored to your needs. Now, take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, you can get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/DSM and use code DSM. That's hungryroot.com/DSM, code DSM, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/DSM, code DSM. There's a lot coming at us right now. Too much. So when you need a pause and a reset, Calm is a tool you can reach for to release stress and find space to breathe, even on the busiest days. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, and it's here to help you feel better. I've been using the Calm app when I wake up in the middle of the night, which is happening more than I'd like these days. And I had developed this bad habit of just firing up my favorite podcasts to help me get back to sleep. But you know what doesn't help me get back to sleep? Listening to podcasts that grab my attention. Instead, the other night, I opened up the Calm app and played a sleep story read to me by Cillian Murphy as he described the landscapes of Ireland. The Calm app is also useful in daylight hours if you need to bring yourself back into focus when your nerves get snagged. There are guided meditations to help you work through anxiety and stress, and grounding exercises to help you reset when you're feeling overwhelmed. Calm your mind, change your life. Calm has an exclusive offer just for listeners of our show. Get 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/slateDSM. This is an amazing value. Go to calm.com/slateDSM for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. Calm.com/slateDSM. Over the next few years, Peter shifted his approach to photography. He stopped chasing combat overseas and started teaching young photographers in the Middle East to chronicle the conflict around themselves. And he took assignments at home, covering the protests, poverty and deindustrialization in rural communities, and the January 6th riots at the Capitol. In 2015, Peter went along with the journalist who was writing about active Ku Klux Klan members in Tennessee and Maryland, and he took photos of their gatherings, a wedding between two Klan members, a barbecue, and a cross burning on a lawn.
I got permission to be there, used a small camera, didn't talk much, made myself kind of as boring as possible. And then, it's funny because people kind of, if people aren't interested in you as a photographer, like they kind of start ignoring you pretty quickly. Like if they just think you're some kind of like weird guy that doesn't talk much, but like they've accepted that you're there to take their picture and they've agreed to it, then I just get to go about my business as an observer.
Well, and it's interesting that you describe like kind of fading into the background, because the most, sort of arresting photograph that you took of a wedding, it's a Klan wedding. It's a woman and a man in ornate Klan robes. Their dog is in a Klan robe next to them. They're in front of hay bales. It's almost like they're posing for you, like it's a wedding photo.
Oh, they were definitely posing for me. I mean, this was the wedding day of two people from the Klan who both were following kind of like a multi-generational line of Klan members. They were super poor, kind of desperately poor. And the Klan was there, like, gave them a sense of kind of community as much as anything else. They also said some of the most vile, obscene, racist things you'll ever hear in your life. And so there's this, as an observer, but not as intimate, there is always this kind of tension between like how horrifying I find everything that they represent is, and how like on an individual level, like there can still be sort of like a reservoir of empathy, for them, and that paradox is one I've always navigated as a photographer, particularly when I'm like working with people or groups that I sort of philosophically profoundly disagree with. And it was like, for a moment, kind of like I was a wedding photographer, right? And like at weddings, people want to have a posed picture. And so like, oh, hey, photographer or whatever. I'm not even sure if they knew my name. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But like, it was like, can you take our wedding picture? So in a weird way, like, I didn't like, I mean, that picture, that arresting picture is essentially a picture of kind of how they wanted to be seen at that moment. And what's interesting about the picture, what I like about the picture, why it's also a bit of a poison chalice of a picture, is that ambiguity that like they see one thing in the photograph. To them, it represented one thing, and to many people who see it, it represents something completely different, is like the tension and the paradox that makes it like extremely compelling. It also makes it dangerous.
When did you see this image on an album cover of Kanye West?
Yeah, well, just as a, when I've done like talks about photography in the past, I often talk about like the thing I struggle with the most with photography is that like you can take pictures with like intent and contextualize it with intent and with purpose, but that ultimately, particularly in like the digital age we're living in, people can do with the picture anything they please because
Yeah.
you lose control of the image when it's stripped from context. And I think it's like an interesting kind of philosophical discussion when you're talking about to people who want to be photographers about it. But then like never in my wildest dream or nightmare did I imagine that like it was going to be used as the kind of used in an unauthorized way by Ye, the artist formerly known as Kanye West, someone whose music that I for a long time like loved and admired, and if it had been at a different time, it would have been like an exciting thing to happen. But instead, like wake up, I was on my like vacation with my wife in her 7th month of pregnancy, and like I wake up in the morning, and I see that like the first text message I see is like a number I don't know, and it's this guy being like, "Hey, what's the name of the dog in the KKK wedding picture?" And like snap awake, like I can wake up my wife and tell her, and she's just like thinks she's dreaming, and I didn't know what to. I mean, I was sort of horrified. I was worried that my like agency had kind of mistakenly licensed them the picture, and then when it was clear that they hadn't and that I hadn't given any permissions, then called a copyright lawyer and initiated this legal process that's still ongoing.
Uh-huh. I imagine there's two strong feelings, which is I took this photograph. This is my creative professional work, and it's being used by a superstar, and I'm not being paid for my work. There's that set of professional concerns.
Sure, yeah.
And then the other set of concerns is my work has been stripped of the way that I chose to present it, and I'm not sure what Kanye West is trying to say with a photograph of two people in Klan robes getting married in front of hay bales. And what is my work being used in service of? Are those two equally strong feelings?
I would say the second feeling was significantly stronger than the first, because in the end, like, yeah, a copyright violation, like it's annoying, but like there's a process, and usually the way it's annoying or upsetting doesn't have like a much of an impact on like my beliefs or values. And so the second version of this, it was the one that was the much stronger feeling. But it was mixed with this, like, the way I described the picture a little bit too. It's like there's pictures that like I observe things that are happening and then pluck them out of the context they're in, and then reframe it in my own context as perhaps part of a narrative that has like nothing to do directly with what I saw at that moment. Like those are most of the kind of pictures I take and then use to my own ends, to my own devices. And then there are other images like the KKK one that, these KKK members were presenting themselves as they wanted to be presented. To me, to react to that photographically kind of somehow made sense to me in my own vision of them as much as it made sense to them in their own vision. And then this third party comes along in the form of Kanye West and like, I guess sees much more of what they saw when they posed for that picture than what I saw when I took the picture. So what can I really say? What do I really think about myself and the picture I took when it gets reappropriated almost exactly as it was taken, though weirdly enough, there's a noose in the photograph, which is photoshopped out.
Your photograph
My
includes the
photograph has
dog
a noose.
and the noose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're standing under a noose. And there's a little dog wearing a little handmade KKK robe that says white power on it. And those elements were like photoshopped out, which is also weird because why, like, why those things, you know? To me, those are the things in a way that make the photograph actually way more interesting in a way too, because the absurdity and the creepiness of it, you know? So when it just becomes like, I don't know what the photograph is when it's just this couple. And anyhow, he like changed the skin color of the man from white to black too. Like that's also part of the picture when you zoom in.
Yeah, from what you can see through the eye holes and the hands.
Exactly, through the eye holes and the hands. So,
and the caption that in the now deleted social media post was WW3.
Right. Song titles like Heil Hitler on it. I mean, not my cup of tea.
Not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
When you think about what your work might look like as you become a parent and like how you approach your work, how you approach time away to embed or to create relationships, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, well, I think I can probably accurately say that I'm having like a midlife crisis of sorts. And where like the thing that gave me like a sense of purpose for a long time is something that is also kind of drawing to a natural close. Which I don't want to say that too firmly because like I've thought at different points that I was going to not ever go back to a war zone again, and I did, and so like it's got a hold on me. But what that means with a child, I don't know. I'd like to think that I won't, but I'd like to think all sorts of things about myself that aren't true. So you know, I'll have to see. And but mostly it's so in a way it's part. And my wife, who's a journalist as well, you know, is supportive of me when I do my work with a purpose. You know, I remember when the war in Ukraine started, and I had like some very good assignment offers and was tempted to go. We like talked it through, and she's like, "Are you?" And like based on like the way we're talking about this, are you basically saying that you want to go to the Ukraine because all your friends are going? And I was like, kind of, maybe, kind of.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, okay, I'm not going to Ukraine because like, you know, and it was weird. I had to have this conversation with myself the same way I did with Egypt, but of course it landed in a different way. And yet, but after October 7th, because I spent 10 years already documenting the conflict in Israel and Palestine, I said, look, I need to go. She's like, totally get it. You should go. And I did, and went after the war, after the immediate part, and a few more times since then. But I didn't cover it with the intensity that I would have covered these sorts of things in the past. And partly because it's just that period of my life is ending, and partly because photography has limits, the limits of the instrument. It has a fidelity to reality that like creatively I don't feel as connected to anymore. And like, you know, the weird thing about the creative process for me has always been, you know, there's always been this line between what is kind of an artistic process and what is a journalistic process. And I've always tried to kind of straddle that with my work, because both value systems and communication systems have like a lot of meaning to me, and photography just has outer limits, or I have limits, and I've reached those. And so, you know, I essentially like have just started spending all my spare time making artworks that are kind of drawn, illustrated, painted, loosely based on photographs, but are derived from like weird, murky scenes that I see in my brain that are coming from reality, but manifest as something completely different. And so I'm, trying to find the right language to communicate this thing that's bubbling in me that I can't quite define, but somehow my like hands know how to make something of it. And hopefully I'll get there eventually.
That's photographer Peter van Agtmael. His wife surpassed both the American and French pregnancy terms and gave birth at 42 weeks. Peter did take his camera into the delivery room, but used one hand as he was holding hands with his wife. He has yet to review the pictures. Peter and his family are now in Washington, D.C. because he has a residency at the Corcoran School of Art and Design and an exhibition that just opened called Americas. It will be up until January 25th. We put a link in our show notes. As for going back into conflict zones, Peter says it's not an if, but how and when. But for now, he's enjoying staying with his family and being a new dad. This episode was produced by Zoe Azoulay. The rest of the Death, Sex, and Money show team includes Andrew Dunn and Cameron Drews. Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer. Mia Lobel is the head of Slate Podcast. Hillary Fry is Slate's editor-in-chief. You can support the production of our show by joining our membership program, Slate Plus. You'll get bonus episodes from our show, at least 2 a month, and other shows like Decoder Ring and How To. And you can listen to all of Slate's podcasts ad-free. To join Slate Plus, subscribe directly from the Death, Sex, and Money show page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just go to slate.com/DSM Plus to get access wherever you listen. Our theme music is by the Reverend John DeLure and Steve Lewis. If you're new to our show, welcome. We're glad you're here. Find us and follow us on Instagram at Death, Sex, Money. And you can read my weekly newsletter. Subscribe to that at annasale.substack.com. You can also reach us anytime with voice memos, pep talks, questions, or critiques at our email address, deathsexmoney@slate.com. We love hearing from you. A few years after Peter's near-death experience in Egypt, he found himself in the same city and visited the same spot where he met the mob. Did you take a picture of the highway?
I did. I took a bunch of pictures. None of them good, unfortunately.
Because it's
just a boring spot. And I tried to see if I could load the picture with pathos and emotion that was somehow would transcend the fact that it's just a boring spot. But it didn't work, So c'est la vie. That's photography, You never know what you're gonna get, no matter how skilled or knowledgeable you are. You either get it or you don't.
I'm Anna Sale, and this is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Here's what happens when you go to Saks.com and browse around a little bit. You very quickly get a sense of what is happening in fashion. It's basically like walking the streets of the most fashionable block in New York City without leaving my house. For instance, maybe you have been wondering what is happening with jeans right now and what is my jeans personality. Well, you can go to Saks.com, just go to the clothing vertical, scroll down to where it says jeans, click on that, and then there it is, all of these different jean silhouettes. The barrel silhouette, wide leg, high-rise, straight leg jean, something called the half-pipe ankle jean from Mother. There's Rag & Bone, Good American, Cynthia Rowley, Frame, designers and brands I know, and ones that I'm glad I'm discovering. There is so much to explore at Saks.com based on your personal style and what you are looking for. So this fall, whether you're going to try out the latest fashion trends or looking to curate a closet that stands the test of time, Saks has you covered. And listen to this. They have in-store stylists there to guide and inspire you, helping you find pieces that fit every aspect of your lifestyle. Or if you prefer online shopping, Saks.com offers a curated selection tailored to your taste, from new arrivals by your favorite designers to stylish pieces for your everyday needs. If you want shopping to be fun and easy, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day.
And Doug.
Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.